There is a widespread, incredibly dangerous misunderstanding about empaths that shapes how the world treats them. People look at a gentle soul and immediately assume that softness equates to weakness. They look at someone who possesses immense patience and mistake that endurance for passivity, thinking they can push boundaries without consequence. When an empath offers forgiveness, it is often misconstrued as total surrender, a sign that they will simply accept mistreatment indefinitely. People constantly mistake emotional kindness for emotional blindness, falsely believing that because an empath chooses peace, they must be blind to the games being played around them. This is the ultimate deception. Empaths are not fragile just because their feelings run deep. In reality, their depth is their greatest armor. They are remarkably powerful entities because they routinely survive, process, and carry psychological burdens that would completely destroy the average person's emotional well-being. If you make the mistake of pushing an empath past their absolute limit, you trigger a psychological shift that changes the fabric of the relationship permanently. This transformation does not announce itself with a loud, dramatic outburst. There are no screaming matches, no explosive arguments, and no theatrical displays of anger. Instead, the shift happens quietly, coldly, and with absolute finality. The temperature in the room simply drops. The vibrant warmth that once defined their presence instantly evaporates, replaced by an unbreakable wall of indifference. This is because the most dangerous version of an empath is never the emotional one who cries, expresses hurt, or fights to be heard. The version you truly have to fear is the emotionally detached one. When an empath reaches this state of detachment, they are no longer invested enough to even be angry. They have simply closed the door, locked it from the inside, and checked out of your emotional reality completely. This quiet detachment is born from a lifetime of intense observation, because empaths are perpetual students of human behavior. Even when they are standing completely still, saying absolutely nothing, they are actively observing everything happening around them. Their minds operate like a high-definition radar, constantly scanning the environment for subtle shifts that ordinary people completely miss. They pick up on the slightest micro-expressions, sudden changes in vocal tone, the heavy weight of shifting energy, and the hollow ring of fake concern. They can spot forced affection from a mile away, recognize hidden disrespect disguised as a joke, and instantly decode complex manipulation when it is dressed up as love. Because their emotional intelligence is so highly developed, it literally trains their brain to detect even the tiniest behavioral inconsistencies. They notice when a person's actions fail to align with their words, registering the mismatch immediately. This hyper-awareness is precisely why many empaths choose to stay silent far longer than anyone expects. This silence is never a sign of unawareness or confusion. It is an active period of processing and evaluation. They are not hiding from the truth. They are quietly collecting emotional evidence, stacking up every lie, every broken promise, and every manipulative tactic. An empath almost always understands the exact truth of a situation long before they ever decide to confront it. When they choose to stay quiet, they are giving you a silent grace period. They are holding back, deeply hoping that you will naturally choose honesty and self-correction before the psychological consequences of your actions become entirely irreversible. They want you to do the right thing on your own. However, when that grace period is met with continuous deceit, the accumulated impact of repeated pain alters human psychology forever. The empath's mind fundamentally rewires itself for survival, shifting its focus from trying to save the connection to permanently protecting its own peace. When an empath is hurt, their initial instinct is never to run away. It is to heal and understand. At first, they will communicate with incredible patience. They will openly explain their feelings, explicitly lay out where the hurt is coming from, and actively try to repair the cracks in the foundation. They will ask deep, clarifying questions, searching for a misunderstanding or a logical reason behind the painful behavior. This is because emotionally intelligent people are hardwired to seek constructive solutions before they ever consider separation. They want to bridge the gap, fix the disconnect, and restore the harmony. They give endless chances because they can see the hidden potential and the unhealed wounds in others. But empathy is a finite resource, and it cannot survive indefinitely in a toxic environment. When this open, vulnerable communication is repeatedly met with lies, gaslighting, and calculated manipulation, a profound psychological breaking point is reached. The empath's brain realizes that its kindness is being used as a weapon against it, and it begins to adapt for basic psychological survival. To protect itself from further trauma, the brain shuts down the emotional pathways, and the empath completely stops reacting. This sudden lack of reaction is almost always misread by the people around them. Most people look at the newfound silence and wrongly think, "Good, they are finally calming down, the drama is over, and things are going back to normal." They could not be more wrong. There is a massive, fundamental psychological difference between emotional peace and emotional shutdown, and mistaking one for the other is a critical error. Real emotional peace is a beautiful, healthy state that naturally contains warmth, openness, and a desire for deeper connection. Emotional shutdown, however, is a cold survival mechanism that contains pure, unyielding distance. It is an internal fortress built to keep the toxic person out. The exact moment an empath stops investing their energy, their tears, and their care into the connection, the relationship silently collapses from the inside out. There is no grand explosion, just a quiet, total evaporation of the bond. This silent shutdown is exactly how the psychological power dynamic is completely flipped, ultimately overthrowing the manipulator. Manipulative individuals do not actually care about fixing problems. They feed entirely on emotional access. They thrive on causing chaotic arguments, forcing the other person to beg for basic respect, watching them cry in frustration, and pushing them to constantly defend their character. These intense, painful emotional reactions are incredibly valuable to a manipulator because they serve as absolute validation. They reassure the manipulator that they are still the master of the emotional atmosphere, and that they still hold total power over the empath's mental state. But when the empath undergoes a shutdown and suddenly becomes completely calm, that vital emotional access is instantly cut off. In a flash, all of that toxic control vanishes into thin air. The manipulator is left staring at a blank wall, completely unable to predict the empath's emotional responses anymore. And this sudden unpredictability creates massive psychological anxiety within the manipulator. This dramatic shift explains why harmful people often become noticeably more aggressive, hostile, or desperate when an empath finally goes quiet. The silence removes their psychological influence entirely, leaving them powerless. It is an established psychological principle that people become deeply uncomfortable and erratic the exact moment their emotional control over another human being disappears. They will try everything to get a rise out of the empath, hurting them worse, throwing insults, or faking emergencies just to see if they can get a spark of the old reaction back. But none of it works anymore. Once an empath reaches this advanced stage of detachment, they stop seeking validation, love, or approval from the very person who is hurting them. They no longer care how the manipulator views them, and they no longer need them to understand their side of the story. The moment the empath reclaims their validation from within, they become absolutely impossible to deceive, control, or manipulate ever again. Severe emotional pain is an incredible teacher, and the primary lesson it instills in an empath is flawless pattern recognition. In the beginning, an empath moves through life giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, deliberately choosing to see potential rather than reality. But after surviving enough betrayal, broken promises, and cycles of mistreatment, their psychological defense mechanisms kick in. They stop ignoring the red flags that they used to brush under the rug. They stop over-explaining their feelings to people who are dedicated to misunderstanding them. And they completely stop chasing closure from the very individuals who broke them. They finally realize that closure doesn't come from a manipulator's confession. It comes from their own acceptance. Most importantly, they stop trying to rescue, fix, or save people who actively enjoy causing damage. They accept that some people are committed to their own dysfunction, and no amount of empathy can change a person who isn't ready to change themselves. This total shift creates a massive shockwave because people quickly become deeply addicted to the emotional safety that empaths naturally provide. Toxic and self-absorbed individuals grow entirely accustomed to having a safe harbor, someone who practices deep, non-judgmental listening, offers consistent and unwavering support, and grants endless forgiveness regardless of the offense. This emotional abundance acts like a drug, giving others a sense of security and validation they cannot find anywhere else. The tragedy is that people almost never realize the true value of that presence while it is readily available. They take it for granted, treating it as an infinite, unbreakable resource. But when the empath finally withdraws, that warmth, safety, and availability vanish in an instant. The sudden emotional desert leaves the other person experiencing a severe form of psychological withdrawal. They feel anxious, disoriented, and exposed, suddenly realizing that they were consuming a high-level emotional energy that they never appreciated, respected, or reciprocated. Breaking an empath always, without fail, creates intense regret later on. This regret doesn't happen because the empath seeks revenge, plays mind games, or tries to punish the person who hurt them. In fact, a detached empath doesn't care enough to seek revenge. Instead, the regret happens because the empath's total absence exposes exactly what their presence was protecting you from the entire time. When an empath is in your life, their energy acts as a shield against the harshness of reality. Their deep understanding keeps your loneliness at bay, balances your emotional confusion, and fills your internal emptiness with genuine warmth. The empath was quietly carrying the entire emotional weight of the relationship completely alone, absorbing the shock waves of conflict and smoothing over the rough edges of life. The very moment they choose to drop that burden and walk away, the emotional atmosphere changes instantly. Suddenly, everyone else is forced to feel exactly how heavy, chaotic, and cold reality truly is without that protective shield. This transformation proves that the deepest feelers eventually become the strongest, most formidable observers, because intense pain sharpens psychological awareness to a razor-thin edge. An empath who survives systemic betrayal undergoes a powerful mental evolution. They learn to clearly see through the masks people wear. They learn exactly who drains energy just by walking into a room, who weaponizes sympathy to get their way, and who performs calculated kindness strategically to set up future manipulation. Once these toxic behavioral patterns become fully visible, the empath can no longer be fooled by charming words or empty promises. This is the exact moment where raw emotional maturity evolves into pure, controlled power. It is not a loud, aggressive, or boastful power. It is a quiet, unshakable authority. It is the profound kind of power that no longer needs approval, no longer seeks validation, and possesses the ultimate strength to simply walk away from toxicity without offering a single word of explanation. An empath's emotional shutdown never happens on a whim or during a temporary moment of anger. It is the direct clinical result of prolonged stress exposure and chronic emotional exhaustion. When a human nervous system is subjected to months or years of constant disrespect, subtle betrayal, and unreciprocated care, it activates a permanent self-defense mechanism. Once this detached state fully develops within an empath, trying to reconnect with them becomes an almost impossible task. You cannot simply apologize, promise to change, or use old romantic memories to win them back. The empath's brain has completely rewired its view of you. They no longer listen to your words. Instead, they remember the toxic patterns, the heavy energy, and the severe lack of behavioral consistency you displayed over time. They look at your sudden urge to fix things and see it as a desperate reaction to losing control, rather than a genuine desire to change. Trust that has been broken that deeply, systematically, and repeatedly simply cannot be rebuilt. The emotional foundation is turned to dust, and no amount of sweet-talking can make a fortress stand on dust. Because of this finality, many people enter a state of absolute panic once they realize the empath has truly slipped away. They arrogantly assume that because the empath forgave them 50 times in the past, they will easily forgive them a 51st time. They tell themselves, "I'll just give them some space and win them back later when they cool down." But they fail to realize that an emotionally detached empath rarely, if ever, returns. Even if you manage to convince them to return physically due to shared responsibilities, family ties, or logistical reasons, they are completely gone emotionally. You are living with a ghost of who they used to be. The vibrant warmth, the deep eye contact, and the soft, nurturing presence are gone, replaced by polite, freezing diplomacy. Empaths are human beings with strict psychological limits. They are not emotional tools designed for endless sacrifice, nor are they an infinite safety net for your bad behavior. The more emotionally mature and intelligent an empath becomes, the less tolerance they develop for manipulation disguised as love. They learn that true love protects your peace, while manipulation exploits your patience. True emotional safety is one of the rarest, most valuable currencies in the human experience. And once it is deliberately destroyed, it can never be recreated artificially. You cannot buy it back, you cannot fake it, and you cannot force it. An empath possesses the unique, beautiful ability to survive completely fine on their own, entirely independent of the people who hurt them. They are perfectly capable of taking all that intense love, deep understanding, and profound care that they wasted on a toxic person and turning it completely inward to heal themselves. They survive because their strength was forged in the fire of their own deep feelings. However, the exact opposite is true for the person who took them for granted. Most people cannot emotionally recover from losing the only person in the world who truly, genuinely understood them. They spent so long using the empath as an emotional dumping ground and a constant source of validation that they forgot how cold and lonely the world feels without that customized comfort. By the time the true value of the empath is finally realized, the ultimate irony of the situation plays out. The very person everyone underestimated, the one who was viewed as soft, weak, and easily manipulated, has already moved on completely, while the toxic person is just beginning to realize the magnitude of what they lost and is starting to experience deep regret. The empath has already completed their internal grieving process months ago. They did their crying while they were still in the relationship. They spent countless lonely nights processing the pain, adapting their mind, and letting go of the connection bit by bit while they were still looking you in the eye. Because they did the heavy psychological work in secret, their final departure is effortless and unshakable. They do not look back, they do not hold grudges, and they do not wish you harm. They simply take their priceless emotional energy and walk away to invest it in a life and in people who actually deserve it.